Hey everyone, on this episode of Teeter Talks, I had the absolute pleasure and got rather hungry speaking to my friend Khalil Khamis. He's the CEO of Crafty Ramen and the president of Mojo Food Group. I got hungry because we talked about food a lot on this episode. He is the owner of 7 Harvey's franchise locations and had a lot of wisdom and insights to share on entrepreneurship, on leadership, on life in general. We had such a great conversation. We chatted about all the things, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. And warning, you may not want to listen to this if you're hungry, because it'll probably make you hungry too. Enjoy. Well, hello, Khalil. How are you?
Hey, Marissa. I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks so much for joining me here on my podcast. It's funny. You and I have known each other for about a year. We have a lot of mutual connections. And as time goes by, I'm realizing we have more. It's a very small community that we live in here. We met volunteering on the hospital board. You're the chair of this incredible board in our local community. But you are also a local business owner. So I have noticed a quality about you. And I share this quality with another friend of mine who's also, I would call her a serial entrepreneur. I call it the silent but deadly type. And I mean that in a really good way, because when I first met you, I thought all the wonderful things about you. And then I kind of get to know you, and there's layers and layers to this guy. You were up to so much good. In my opinion, you've achieved so many great things, great success. You've got this great life, but you're really kind of unassuming. And I wonder if that's part of your strategy to be a little bit underestimated, maybe, or unassuming. Or has anyone even said this about you before? Or am I just way out in left field? I don't know.
Well, wow. Thank you for the kind words. That's amazing. It's always interesting to hear what other people think from the outside. And no, I wouldn't say there's a strategy per se. It's just how I operate and how I show up, and weirdly balanced between an introvert and an extrovert. And that's probably what's coming through with that observation. But thank you.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think it's a great quality. It's something that I think I've always tried to remain fairly private in my life. I mean, obviously launching a podcast and my own company as of late has kind of put me out there in a way that I'm not really familiar with, and I'm still kind of figuring out. But I do really admire that kind of unassuming, underestimated kind of quality when people show up in circles as you get to know them. So I think it's a wonderful quality. There's so many layers to you, and I really look forward to diving into all of them today.
Thanks. Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because there's so much power in productizing yourself. But then there's this whole other push and pull that comes if you're not naturally somebody who's just happy to be out there and your face out there. So you get some internal emotional push and pulling when you do try and go productize yourself.
I could talk about this for hours. I kind of, on one of my episodes with John Sleeman, talked about this, and even with our mutual friend Ariana, who's an influencer, just this idea of when you become the brand, either on purpose or inevitably for your company or your product, and what the expectations are of you once you become this brand, how you put yourself out there, how do you balance privacy? I'm still maybe not struggling with it, but I'm still trying to figure out that maybe balance for myself in terms of how much I put myself out there. And I could talk for hours about this idea of, showing up loud and successful, but versus this idea of, this unassuming, silent, but deadly type. So we'll put a pin in that one and maybe come back to that one for sure.
Good.
But
that's a whole nother podcast.
Exactly. We'll talk about that one next time. So you are a very successful entrepreneur, in my opinion. You are one of the youngest multi-unit franchisees in Harvey's franchise system. So how many Harveys do you own today?
We own 7 locations across 4 cities.
Amazing. And some of the top you own one of the most successful, top producing number 1 stores in the country, and also the number 1 drive-through in the country. So you're gonna have to tell me, what makes a Harvey's the number 1 drive-through in the country?
We do own the number 1 grossing location in the country. That's in Hamilton. And then our South Guelph location is the number 1 ranked drive-through from a dollar or volume perspective. And really, when we opened that store 12 years ago, we just had a deep belief in people want their fast food fast. And Harvey's had this connotation of being a bit slow. So we would just put focus on it from day one and gained consumer trust through, okay, I know I can go to this location, be in and out in 5 minutes for my 30-minute lunch hour. And I think the importance with big brands is high consumer trust. And when you win over that trust, then you drive frequency and you can continue to grow repeat purchases.
Yeah, the expectation's critical, right? To be able to meet the expectations of someone exactly where they are. If you are in the drive-through, it's probably because you needed to be in the drive-through and you probably are looking for a certain element of convenience or time factor. So being able to meet that is pretty incredible. I'm curious, have you ever worked the drive-through?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I grew up in restaurants, working in hospitality my whole life. So I've done everything from wash dishes all the way up to figure out marketing with our national team at Recipe Unlimited, who owns Harvey's.
That's amazing. And I think people would argue that there's a lot of value in knowing all the different roles. And we'll get to this question, this idea of working in the business versus on the business as an entrepreneur and figuring out where you can spend your time and the value of knowing what it's like to actually work in the business while you're also trying to work on the business. I guess I asked because I've romanticized this idea of working a drive-through and how fun it would be. And because every once in a while you
Very
just
fun.
come across someone great. You see all the videos on social that funny things that happen in the drive-through, either people doing things coming through or the people working it, providing exceptional service or something like that. So any good drive-through stories that you guys have, any experiences that you guys have had at your
Oh,
locations?
there's so many, and when you do have a little bit of fun with the person on the other side who can't yet see you, you generally get these crazy reactions once they get up to the window. It's like, wow, that was the best experience I've ever had. And a lot of people, when they're entering a drive-through, are just laser focused on their day. They need their food fast. They need it this. So if you set an expectation they weren't expecting, then you get a really fun outcome. And we've seen everything from really funs and surprises. Somebody said it's their birthday, they get a little apple pie. And then we've seen cars get stuck and canoes try to turn a corner that doesn't work. So you see a
Only in
lot of
Canada.
really
Yeah.
interesting things. And when we're putting 400 cars through on a daily basis, inevitably there's going to be one or two stories every day.
I think that's amazing. I love it. My kids love going to the drive-through. I think my kids got used to going to the drive-through as children. I mean, now I sound like I go to fast food places all the time, which it was just the convenience of instead of lugging my two kids inside, I would go through the drive-through and they would love it when I would roll down the back window and they could say hi. And, every once in a while or fairly often you'd get someone who would interact with them. You choose your location. So I do think that experience is great for the consumer in terms of meeting them exactly where they are and what they need. So that's amazing. Now, you already mentioned it. You grew up in the restaurant business. And again, this is another romantic idea that I've had about owning a restaurant and how fun that would be. I think it's just because I like eating food. I don't like making it. So I don't know how far I'd go, but
Yeah,
tell me a little bit about growing up. Yeah.
there's a really weird thing where just people want to own a restaurant, and every time somebody
Yeah.
tells me that, I'm like, you have to be a bit crazy. And I think all business owners need to be a bit crazy, and we'll probably talk about that in a minute.
Yep.
But yeah, so my parents, so to back up, are refugees to Canada. When they were 13 years old, they were exited from their country of Uganda. Idi Amin is the dictator. There's different movies you can watch on that story. My grandparents were in the hospitality industry back in Africa, so my parents had some of that seeded into them, as I do today. And after about 10 years living in Canada, they bought the Diana downtown in Guelph and turned that around and ran it successfully for about 20 years. And then my dad sold his half to his brother and bought one Harvey's franchise. So I grew up getting paid 10 cents a dish rack to put dishes to the dishwasher at Diana's and working the Hillside Festival. Long, grueling, but really fun weekends doing that with them, and then joined the family business after university. And that's how we got from two. I joined when we had two locations, and now up to seven, as we mentioned.
It's an amazing story. And you mentioned your parents being refugees, and I just think of all the different businesses that were built in this country, specifically off the backs of people who came here with a dream to build something, and then to build something. And I've been to this restaurant, the Diana that you're referring to. It's wonderful to build something so wonderful that builds community. And, I think for you growing up in that situation, it was probably wonderful to have this wonderful space where your community and your family kind of collaborated. I wonder though, about the pressures. I've had friends who grew up in family businesses. I have friends that are still in family businesses. I have clients who own family businesses. Sometimes the children of business owners are heavily engaged, very involved, absolutely want to take over the business. There was really no other choice, not choice, but they really want to. And then you've got the other group who enjoy the luxuries of their parents owning a business. Perhaps it's just not for them per se. Where did you land? And maybe somewhere between there, was it kind of destiny or was it a long road to getting into the family business?
Yeah, I would say it was destiny that I didn't realize as I was going through school. And yeah, family business can be extremely powerful. It can also be extremely complicated.
Yes.
It has so much dynamic attached to it because when it works really well, you have this group of folks that are just way more aligned than any, individual team could ever be because, it's collectively putting the roof over your heads. So
Yep.
there's that like innate, and we need this to survive, and then we're all in this together. And I truly believe the success in family business is no different than a traditional business in that you need lots of communication, having everybody on the same page, positive friction, which is, also really good in regular business. So I think, that's the really important part of it. And when I was going through university, I studied economics and finance, thought I was going to be a Bay Street banker. I
Oh,
was
okay.
working at TD part time throughout university. Had 3 or 4 jobs going through school, and then when I graduated, my mom actually got sick for a short period of time. Thankfully, she's doing really well now, and no long term effects there. But so I took a leave of absence from the bank, and then started working with my dad in the family business. And after about 6 months, I'm like, oh, this is great. I love this. And he's like, well, if you stay, we can keep growing. So it was kind of something that happened by accident, but was kind of always the journey that should have happened. And now we're here.
See, I didn't know that. I guess I just assumed that you were maybe headed there. I didn't know that about you, your dream to be on Bay Street. I mean, you're very good with numbers. That is something that we know about you. And I thought maybe just the university thing was just a way to formalize your love of numbers and go apply it to the family business. But I love these stories that you hear of people shifting gears. And I mean, I'm the person who went to school, to university, kind of with the dream of being a doctor, signed up for all these courses that would also ultimately take me down that path because I wanted to help people. I'm also
Okay.
the person who dropped out of university after 3 days. So that's a long story. And then moved back the next day and registered for business courses. So that's a whole other podcast. But I, I love telling people that you can change your mind. Like you can switch gears, you can change your mind. The key sometimes is just to keep moving. Like I'm going to head in this direction. This seems to make sense. This seems to feel good. Do lots of different things. I'm curious about these multiple jobs you had in university, because I do think that keeping busy is also where opportunities pop up. What did you do to stay busy in university? It also keeps you out of trouble, which is nice too, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, yeah. One thing I'll throw in just to layer on what you
Yeah.
said there is we truly believe that there's no such thing as being late or early to life, right? So we don't need to
Yeah,
entrap
absolutely.
ourselves in this idea of I need to do this by this. I should do. There's this saying that's like you could should your pants. So just removing that word should
Good
from the
your pants.
vocabulary, yeah, it's very, very difficult to do.
True.
But if we can remove ourselves from that, it definitely helps have that flexibility that you speak of. The different jobs in university. So I helped my parents one day a week at the Harveys. Was working part time as a teller at TD with my best friend Rashawn and my now assistant Justine. So we had a really, really great crew, and it was an awesome
Amazing.
job while we were in school. I was the campus manager for a trip company called Campus Vacations. We did ski trips and down south trips. So we had a team of people working with me. Before you could easily just go sign up online. There was lots of boots on the ground and guerrilla type marketing that happened back then. And then myself and 3 friends had a business called Fresh Media Events, which really started, as most businesses started, through a want or a need. And we just didn't want to wait in line for the bar anymore. So we went and figured out how to get involved. And it started with, promoting bar nights on a Thursday night. And it grew into supporting multiple venues across the city, doing charity events, fashion shows, working with the colleges at the university. And then we started to get into larger scale concerts. So we, famous DJ who has passed, Avicii, we were thankful to do 3 shows with him. And then our claim
Wow.
to fame is that we booked the weekend's first ever show outside of Toronto, here in
Oh my
downtown
goodness.
Guelph. And we didn't even sell it out.
Oh my goodness. Well, these little nuggets that I'm learning about you today, not surprised by any of them, but I think it's amazing because I too had multiple jobs, and I always tell people just get out there and do the things and meet the people, and a lot of these things have obviously served you. You now have a best friend, you have a coworker that you can trust, a co-collaborator. Just having done these jobs, you can say you were the person that brought the weekend to Guelph, which apparently is a place Drake will never go based on his lyrics, but we'll shelf that. But I think it's amazing to kind of get out there and do different things. I mean, speaking as someone who has kind of relaunched her career in a new direction in her 40s, you don't know what you want to do for the rest of your life at that time, right? It's just important to go do something. And you're not going to figure it out sitting at home on the internet Googling jobs, or you're going to figure it out by getting out there, getting your hands dirty, meeting people, having experiences land on your lap, create opportunities. And it's funny too, because most entrepreneurs that I know, their venture that they're currently in was absolutely not their first, and it wasn't their second. And it was probably somewhere between their fifth and their 10th thing that they did. And we'll include like lemonade stands as children,
Yeah.
and selling artwork at family functions to your to your family members. So those things count too. I just think it's, and maybe I'll ask this question. Do you think anybody can be an entrepreneur, or do you just think there's something inside of you that you nurture that allows you to pursue entrepreneurship?
No, so I don't, I believe anybody can try, and everybody
Fascinating.
who feels like they want to try should, but I think you have to be irrationally passionate about something, so that people on the outside say you're a little bit crazy,
Mm-hmm.
to be able to take the full dive, get into it, and really have some success in it.
What about passion versus skill set, right? So what if I'm super passionate about, I don't know, coffee, which I am, by the way, but I don't know anything about running a coffee shop or a coffee business or coffee retail store. Um, how important do you think it is to balance? Or on the flip side of that, people find a niche opportunity that is lucrative and they're good at running businesses, but they're not necessarily passionate about coffee, but they'll sell coffee because they see it as a business opportunity. What are your thoughts on balancing that passion versus business elements as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think skill sets can be learned. So I think if you're
Mm.
crazy passionate about something, you can go out and learn the skill set. And to do that, you have to have low ego, park your ego. You have to be able to be vulnerable and say, "Hey, Marissa, I don't know anything about podcasts, but I'm passionate about them." And you have
Yes.
to be willing to ask and learn. And one of the reasons why we've been able to get to where we are in the Crafty Ramen, business is really that. When we launched our e-commerce, nobody in the business knew anything about e-commerce, from fulfillment to delivery to postal codes and a whole new world. But we were passionate about getting our product into people's homes across the country, and we went and learned it and figured it out and asked a million questions along the way, and also made a million mistakes along the way.
Yeah, and we keep talking about entrepreneurship, but I think those lessons and what we're talking about is valuable in anything in life. I think sometimes we wait to do these things, we wait to try new things, especially as we get older. We don't try new things or start new things or put ourselves out there as often. And I think it's this idea of you can learn new skill sets. You may not do it as often, and it might be more painful, says the 40-something-year-old who's been having millennials. Although I am a millennial still, by the way, but the younger millennials teach me how to do all these things on social and all these digital things that I thought I was pretty well versed, but turns out there's a lot that I need to learn. But you can learn new tricks and you can learn new skills. And I think we shy away from things unless we think maybe we could be good at it as we get older. There's no room for failure. I was just listening to a podcast today where they were talking about, we generally tell our kids or people, lean into your strengths, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't do things you're bad at or not good at either, right? It's kind of finding a way to balance those two things. So I can't help every once in a while, but comparing just the life of an entrepreneur to any type of venture that you want to get into as a person or thing that you want to try, or, as a parent or friend or community leader, choose your role. So I think that's
For
great
sure.
advice. And I agree. I think that entrepreneurship can be learned. We mentioned this a little bit earlier about this idea of working in the business versus on the business. What are your thoughts on balancing those two elements of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and as you progress, it gets deeper and deeper. So I truly believe at the start, you need to be in the business a lot. You need to really work it from the ground up to fully understand it. There's a famous DJ, Steve Aoki, and his parents own Benihana, and he says you can't just come in at the top because your parents own the business. You'll ruin the whole thing. And it's so true, right? You can't, unless you see CEOs coming in as CEOs, but they have this 50 years of experience behind them. So I think at the start, it's way heavier weighted on working in the business. And then as you continue to scale and grow, then it starts to shift to working on the business. But it's important to never lose touch with what's happening on the ground floor every day, because that'll drive, in my opinion, the best decisions for the business as you go forward. If you're deeply connected to the people, what we call the people on both sides of the counter, your team and your customer, you're generally going to make better decisions than if you're disconnected from them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would imagine that balance or that ratio of how much time you spend on the business versus in the business changes constantly depending on what's going on or what's happening in the business. So you probably don't get to set kind of, the cruise control on that one to say, oh, now I get to work on the business. Everything's running smoothly. You probably switch back and forward pretty regularly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, you already mentioned Crafty Ramen. So let's talk about Crafty Ramen, because this is a great story. You're an entrepreneur, you're involved with owning multiple Harvey's locations. Now it's 2018, and you're going to fact check me on this one and tell the story better than I can. But you then become a part owner and CEO of Crafty Ramen. So tell us the story of Crafty Ramen.
Yeah. So 2018, a couple years before this, starting to get this inkling of wanting to do something else. So, maybe it's to get out of the parents' shadows, maybe it's to prove something, maybe it's for my ego, but really want to do something else.
Yeah.
Almost before our friends at Lorena opened in town, almost opened a taco shop in town, and the lease didn't quite work out. It was like, there's a niche here. I love tacos. I'll go spend some time in Mexico. But that didn't work out. And then Jared and Mickey had opened Crafty Ramen about a year before 2018, with a lineup out the door from day one. They actually had to close after 2 days to reset, hire a few people, and re-prep, because they just didn't expect that type of response from the community. So I was a regular customer. It's an 8-minute walk from my house, sitting at the bar eating ramen, and got to know them. And just said, hey, I love what you guys are doing. One of my favorite things about hospitality is that you can get the same feeling from a 5-star Michelin, the hot dog before the Blue Jays game.
Oh, yeah.
And empanada on the side of the street in Colombia. Like, to me, I call those perfect hospitality. It's food, it's moment, it's people. So that's the feeling that I got when I was eating at Crafty and connecting with them, and thought there was something special. So we partnered, invested, opened our second restaurant in 2019, 4 months before the COVID pandemic. So we're just like, oh man, I remember day 2 of the pandemic, day 3, sitting in the dining room with Jared, and we're looking at our sales from the day before, and it was, down 90%, and big bank loan. Like, what do we do? And one of the bright spots of COVID was that sense of community that came together, and the people who you thought were competition are all coming together and be like, what are you doing? What are you doing? How are we going to navigate through this? So everybody was trying to figure out different things to do at home. So we said, let's do a ramen meal kit. And we did that from local pickup. It caught virality online. Some of our community members who are influencers supported us and shared it out. And we started to get people from all over North America, all over the world, saying, can you ship this to us? And we're like, okay. Back to the e-commerce story, extremely naive.
Yeah.
And again, you have to be a bit crazy to launch a new business. So
I remember watching this journey on social media. So this is fun to hear you tell it, because it looked fantastic from the outside looking in, like you guys had it all figured out. So yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. And that's a whole interesting conversation on perception from the outside. But yeah, so we launched the ramen meal kit in December 2020 on e-commerce, went through a few iterations of the product along the way. And then it was about 3 or 4 months later where we realized there was something special happening here and we needed some funds to make it happen. So Jared and Mickey said, you need to come on as the CEO. So the CEO title actually happened about 3 years later, through in the middle of COVID. I was like, I got lots of time. It's COVID. So like the decisions you make in that time are very different than operating
COVID
operating out of
clarity.
COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we went to market and we're very lucky to have some investors believe in our vision and join us. And we've reformulated the product now into it's a frozen bowl of ramen all together. You get a layer of broth, noodle, protein, and topping. You heat it up at home, 7 to 10 minutes, and you get the same quality that we use in our restaurant. And what was really cool is we launched e-commerce. Independent retailers started to reach out to us and say, nobody's doing this in grocery. This is cool. We want to sell it. And it was at that was our inflection point where it's like, there's a huge white space here and we have a first mover advantage. And
Amazing.
let's go all in here and see if we can make something special.
I mean, I love this story because like I said, I followed this. I really tried to during COVID in my own community support I ate so much takeout during COVID.
Yeah.
I can't even tell you. I would send, as soon as I figured out on my food delivery apps that I could send food to other addresses, I was sending people food. It became my love language, right? If someone, I'd make McDonald's show up for breakfast on your front door. It was a way of, I felt good. I felt good supporting businesses. And so I feel like it was great to see local restaurants find a way to stay relevant and survive during this time. But the fact that you guys extended and expanded beyond that, like it wasn't just surviving, you actually were focusing on thriving and the next step and what has since become. So you guys also ended up on Dragon's Den for Crafty Ramen in 2022. Yeah. Tell me about that experience, because that just sounds, again, on the outside looking in, it looks very fabulous and exciting. I tend to hear that's not always the case, but tell me about your experience. What was that like?
Yeah, overall it was a really cool experience, and we're super grateful. We've had some really awesome opportunities along the way. We've won Canada's top growing businesses a few years in a row through the Globe and Mail. And the Dragon's Den experience really just helped us add a different level of validation to the business. So, you get the PR that everybody wants, you get the national TV. Yeah. We were lucky that we had just gone through the investor pitches with a whole different groups of investors. So we were well seasoned for the rapid fire questions. And what's really cool is we were in there for an hour and a half and they cut it down to seven minutes. So we cooked for them for about 45 minutes, and that was Jared and Mickey's, started that part of the show. And then I got hammered with questions for 45 minutes. And when you're, pitching a traditional investor, you're sitting across the table having a one-on-one conversation. It's generally a pretty free-flowing type conversation as you go into different parts of the business. In that moment, there's 6 people all throwing questions at you at the same time. And luckily the cameras are hidden, so you have a little less pressure from seeing these cameras in your face. But we're just super grateful because every time we get a whole ton of questions thrown at us about the business, we start to rethink different pieces and parts of it. And is this right? Why are they asking this? These are folks with extensive amounts of experience throwing questions at you. So you have a choice. You can be defensible and defend them, and throw up that ego block, or you can say, hold on, is there something I need to learn through this line of questioning? Yeah. And one thing that we looked at is like, how do we simplify our business? And we've had questions along the way. We have restaurants, we have grocery, we have e-commerce. So, we're going through the process of figuring out how do we really just tighten up our vision and our focus. And that's one thing we learned through that journey.
Amazing. It's great to hear that through all the questions and the peppering of questions, that inevitably, to your point, you're going to pick up on things that even if it's not the person you choose to make a deal with, or even if you walk away without a deal on these shows like Dragon's Den and Shark Tank, inevitably, hopefully these people are learning something as they're leaving that room. They're taking something away from these individuals who clearly know, what they're talking about because they're about to put their money where their mouth is. And so I love that you focus really on the learnings that came from it, but you also got a deal out of it.
Yeah, we got a deal on TV.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we did a deal with Arlene on TV in the Den. We haven't closed anything with her team and District
Okay.
Ventures today, but we've kept them updated on the business, and we've met with them
Amazing.
about 4 times since the show. And even if there isn't a deal on paper, I'm happy to sit down with anybody with a lot of experience and share where we're at, and love to hear their feedback on the business and the plan. And because again, we're forever learners, so
Yeah.
the more people we can connect with and share, our business strategy and get advice or feedback, it's just a win.
Yeah. I mean, to take away something aside from the money or clearly you had some knowledge that you took away. You talked a little bit as well about the branding, so the brand exposure that it gave you. Let's go back to kind of our earlier conversation about being the ambassador of a brand. So, what was that like for you? And maybe what is that still like? Do you feel the pressure to be, and I realize you're not the only owner, there's 3 of you, you've mentioned your partners multiple times. And I know you're operating from a place of collaboration, but sometimes as a CEO, the person taking all the questions and answering the questions, you become the face or the ambassador, if you will. How do you feel about that role? And, does it force you to show up differently? Does it force you to act or think differently? Talk to me a little bit about being the face, maybe not the official face, but probably the face of the brand.
Yeah, we try and divide it into what our strengths are. So,
Mm-hmm.
Mickey and Jared are the marketing face of the brand, and Jared's the chef because he's the chef in the food, and Mickey's the
Yeah.
Japanese inspired. And then I try to be a bit more of a thought leader on the business side of things. So, depending on who we're talking to and what interview
Audience.
comes
Yeah.
in, one of us will take the interview based on what the goals and outcomes are. But yeah, showing up is an interesting one because when you have a very crazy schedule, it's really easy to show up as intimidating or I don't have time. So taking those deep breaths and taking a moment and saying, okay, I'm here for this conversation or this person, and really just resetting and grounding yourself in the ways you do want to show up, welcoming, fun, caring. Um, when you're running through schedule to schedule to schedule, it's easy not to show up like that. So just
Right.
reminding yourself that to have a little bit of fun along the way is how I do it.
And what about on social? Because I mean, you post on social, you're fairly active. Do you have this constant thought in your mind of how much you should be? We're going to should here. How much you should be, quote unquote, sharing, or what people would want to see? Like, how much thought? How contrived is that? The social element of it.
For me, it's really free flowing. I don't set a schedule or a time or amount of posts or something that I'm genuinely trying to get out of it. If an idea resonates with me, if I've thought of something that I want to share, I'll share it out, and that's really how I operate in the social world. There's things that come in all the time, like I want to post this on LinkedIn, and the time doesn't allow it, and I don't beat myself up over it.
Yeah. It's a great philosophy. I know I work with a lot of business owners in my executive coaching capacity, and there's always this thought amongst those who aren't super active on social where they feel they should be, like they're missing out on something, but they don't actually feel like they're missing out, but they feel like they should be there. And my response is always, if you want to do it and it's fun for you and you get excitement and joy and whatever impact it is you're looking for out of putting yourself out there and creating content and engaging with your followers, then do it. I would say at a bare minimum, you should have a certain amount of presence for your brand so that people know you exist. I mean, socials have somehow become this validation that people exist and they want to see that you exist and create a little bit of legitimacy from that. But I don't think, I will continue to push back on you must have this social presence to succeed. You must do things a certain way to succeed. And if you have other channels and ways of growing your business that don't involve posting on social media on a certain cadence or regularity, then don't, and stop shoulding.
Oh, exactly. And there's so many examples. So in today's society, you see the owners of the brands generally that are very active on social. I'll use an
Yeah.
extreme example. Elon Musk is going to have a lot more followers and people watching what he's doing than Tesla per se. there's also some of the largest private companies in the world where we don't really know who's owning it or what's
Yeah.
happening there.
Yeah.
IKEA, Cargill, these are massive, massive businesses that
We have
that don't
no
have
idea
that.
who owns them. Yeah. Or who's running them. And I go back to that silent but deadly thing. And I think it's okay for us not to know all the things about these people. But on the flip side, I know there's a lot of great entrepreneurs out there who are the face of their brands and are putting themselves out there on a very regular basis, creating engaging content. And they're amazing. And I hope they love it. I hope they're doing it because they love it, because there's a lot of great stuff happening. But I did talk to John Sleeman about this on one of my episodes with him. Was he felt the responsibility, as did his children at a very young age, that we screw up something that has our name on it, we're going to screw up the family business. And to your point, like, this is putting a roof over our heads. This is, my last name's Sleeman. The brand is Sleeman. There was a lot of responsibility that came with that. And I think that's an interesting tug of war between, how much you should or would or could put yourself out there. I like that.
Absolutely.
So you already mentioned a few of your valued team members and your partners. You are leading businesses. You are obviously a business leader. You're a leader in our community. What do you think makes a great leader is maybe part one of my question. And talk to me a little bit about your leadership style, where you think you thrive or get your stride as a leader.
Yeah, so things that we try to do to, create and empower great leaders, creating a culture where it's totally okay to make a mistake, but unacceptable
Mm.
not to learn from it. So we
Mm.
want people to try, fail, do, but fail forward.
Yeah.
And then really the idea of empower, educate, and delegate. So what gets me going as a leader, what I love, kind of going into part two there, is working myself out of a job and watching people do what I used to do better, taking something that I had a fraction amount of time for and putting their full time and attention, and just watching people in the organization grow and become their own style of leader, and watching them manage teams, and that's the ultimate goal.
I love that. There's a quote, and I'll probably butcher it, but this idea of being a great CEO is ultimately creating a culture of people that could do the job better than you ever could. And I love that idea of replacing yourself. I love that idea of, I think sometimes we get caught up in leadership roles, not just corporately, maybe in our lives, where we want everything to fall apart in our absence, that somehow is an indication that we are so valued and we're so important. And I don't know when the switch flipped in me, but it's a long time ago I figured out that it's actually the opposite, that a great leader can step away and everything just keeps on ticking, and maybe even better than before, because people will step up and they'll want to do better and they'll want to shine in those moments. But I love that. I love the idea of creating empowered people to do things better than you ever could. And then I never want that two-way learning to go away, right? As a leader, if I stop learning from the people that I'm leading in whatever capacity, that's not what I want. I want to continuously learn.
Absolutely. And you can even look at taking that one step further and saying it's also freeing to know that if you're not there, everything just goes on. It might be better, it might be worse, but those doors are going to open, those customers will be served, and everything, the world just keeps moving. So it can also be a bit freeing as a leader to know
Yeah.
everything's just going to keep moving.
Yeah. And as you say that, it's my leadership role as a mother that I go to right away, where I think of, if I ever want to go away for a weekend, I need to know that my house is not going to burn down. Now, my children may not get bathed for a weekend. They may not eat properly. Hopefully my husband doesn't listen to this episode, but ultimately you start to say, you know what? I want things to thrive while I'm away. I want things to be great. I want my kids not to miss me and, just be great while I'm gone. And part of that comes with setting that situation up as a leader in your
Sure.
house or in your business. As a leader, as a business owner, you can't take vacation if no one can run the business while you're away, right? So the freedom element is very critical, because I think we all want a certain amount of freedom in whatever capacity we show up. On the topic of freedom and leadership, I want to talk about success. How would you define success? And do you consider yourself to be successful?
So it's interesting. We've used that word many times throughout this, and it's
Mm-hmm.
interesting you use the word freedom before prompting the question. I think success is really a construct. Whenever I use the word, I always preface it with whatever success means to you,
Yeah.
because it means so many different things to so many different people. For me, no, I don't feel successful because I'm not at my definition of success, which I believe is the idea of freedom. It's the idea of being able to wake up and operate how you want to operate that day. Wake up when you want, work on what you want, and then ultimately living in the present as much as possible. Because when the calendar is completely full and we're managing however many operating companies, and we're required to be there and we're required to be on all these meetings, we're actually living in tomorrow. We're living in our mind is living in this space that doesn't exist, and we're not really being in the present. So for me, I'll be successful when I have that freedom, and the team is doing a way better job than I am. I'm just there for some support, and then I can. And in those moments, there would be days where you don't work at all, and then there's days where you work 14, 15 hours. So it's really working as the passion thrives, more so want to do versus have to do.
I 100% agree. I think to me, success is the freedom of living your life however you choose to live it. And if it's working 60 hours a week or if it's working 0 hours a week, I want to be able to have choices. I agree. I think that's what success is for me. And that doesn't mean, and really it's not correlated to a number in the bank account. It's not correlated to anything material for what it's worth. That's a lesson that took me a long time to learn, that with success is when I would have this, or when I would buy this, or when I would be able to afford this. And then you realize you're like, well, I still don't feel successful. It's this, and it's a feeling for me. It's not a thing. It's not a status. And it's constantly fleeting to a certain degree. It's constantly moving, this idea of chasing, because some days I feel more successful than others. And it's probably in those days where I felt I could spend my day how I wanted to spend it, as opposed to maybe doing the things I didn't really want to do, but had to do, maybe didn't feel like as successful as a day. But it really has nothing to do with things. And I also think it's not the perfectionist in me, but the person that's always chasing. I suspect you're that type of person too. There was an expression that I learned many years ago from a fellow podcaster. I'm a huge fan of Ed Milet. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but he has this expression, and this changed my life, because he says there's something called blissful dissatisfaction. And what it means is you're happy, you're blissful, but you're not satisfied, which is why you're going to keep going. And it helped me deal with this idea of always chasing, or people would say, oh, you're a perfectionist, or you think the grass is greener, or aren't you successful enough? Again, based on however they defined it. And everybody has their own definition. But I thought, well, I think it's okay to keep moving. And it felt like a moving target for me. So this idea of blissful dissatisfaction has been kind of a guiding light for me, that I'm satisfied. I'm happy. It doesn't mean I'm not happy because I'm chasing or doing more. I'm blissful, but I'm not satisfied.
Oh yeah, there was a lot to unpack in there. You brought up the idea of conditional happiness, right? There's no such thing as conditional happiness, and that's why I personally don't believe in personal goals. I think company goals and KPIs are very important in running a business, but I don't really believe in personal goals, because then you start to get into that trap of conditional happiness. I'll be happy when, I'll be happy if, I'll be happy then. And then what came to my mind as you were speaking to that last part is really just the idea of be fearless in the pursuit of what sets your soul on fire.
Yeah. Yeah. And hopefully your soul's on fire until the day you die. Like, hopefully that's just the way you live your life. Oh, I love that you brought up, I'll be happy when. That is a disease I had for so long. And I'm still surrounded by people I know who have that disease that I care about very much. This idea of like, I'll be happy when, or I'll relax when, or I'll enjoy this when. When is never coming.
That's living in the construct of tomorrow, which actually doesn't exist today, right?
No. I mean, whenever you hear yourself saying those words, I'll be happy when, I'll relax when, just know that there's going to be something else. So that the when is never coming, if you're being completely honest. Oh, I think that's so good. Yeah, I love that. So we talked about your your entrepreneurial ventures, you as a business person, but I also knew you first as a very community oriented, very generous individual. I've asked this question to other arguably very successful people before, this idea of, you're at a point in your career where you could cut the check to a charity, or, take one of your logos, stick it on there, again, cut a check for endorsements and sponsorships. But you are so actively involved, rolling up your sleeves, getting your hands dirty. It's a two-part question. Why do you do that? And what drives you? Where does this come from?
So when my parents bought the Diane downtown after 3 or 4 years of running it, so to caveat this, they were some of the first visible minorities to come to Canada as refugees, and they started to introduce some Indian food on the menu, and the day they did that, overnight they lost 30% of their business. They had people coming in and saying, "It smells like India in here. It smells like Pakistan in here. What is going on?" And those folks didn't want to come back, but they had a base of community allies that said, "No, this food is really, really good, and you need to keep serving it." And it eventually became 2 full-fledged menus, a full Indian menu, full American menu. And really, so the sense of community was instilled in me way back when. And my parents were always out there in the community supporting however they could. And my journey with the hospital foundation started with us doing a barbecue out front of the hospital every year to give back. And then I got to meet the team and started to get involved that way. I think then the second part is there's a bit of selfishness. I love learning. I love connecting with new people. So through my journey at the foundation with yourself and the other incredible board members, the amount of learning that's taken place over the last 6 years by getting the hands dirty, and as you said, just get out there and do things and figure out where that passion could potentially come from. There's a little bit of selfishness as I get to give back, but I also get back myself. And I think just the idea in general of putting value out without expecting anything in return, you will get abundance in return.
Mm-hmm. I am 100% on the same page. I've gotten so much more out of my charity work than I'm sure I've put in. And I feel guilty saying that. Some of my greatest friendships in this city and this community and beyond are people that I've connected with through charity work. One of my favorite things to do is to bring people along with me to do charity work. Like, I love exposing people to volunteering and things like that. It's one of my favorite things. I totally get that. And I think, I suspect that will just always be how you are, getting your hands dirty in community and probably getting more than you're giving, which says a lot because you're giving a lot. And now I'm very curious, how many burgers do you think you have flipped for a good cause? Because your burgers, you're donating. I was at an event yesterday and Harvey's burgers were on the menu, donated by yours truly. So what an amazing thing.
We give out in actual on the ground, setting up a physical tent, somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 burgers a year. This weekend coming up at Tour de Guelph, we'll do about 1,000 burgers. And then we also, we don't like saying no. So we also donate a lot of vouchers, anywhere from 5,000 to 10,000 vouchers a year for free product we give out. And we believe it's one of the best forms of marketing. It's just to be connected with your community and supporting your community.
Yeah, it's my love language, food. And I know it's yours too, because we've shared meals before.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to do some rapid fire with you because I've got some questions up my sleeve. But people can find you at craftyramen.com, harveys.ca. And I know you're on social. All those brands are on social as well. Check it out. Follow. Harvey's is doing great things in the community. If there's a tent with a barbecue and Harvey's is there, it's definitely for a good cause or something awesome's happening. Check it out and try Crafty Ramen. Now, you guys are currently across Canada, breaking into the US soon, correct?
Yeah, so we're currently in about 1,200 retail locations across Canada. We're about to launch nationally with Sobeys in the coming weeks. And then we have some other very large partnerships rolling out later this year, which is extremely exciting. And then our goal is to launch in the US this winter.
Unbelievable. Well, I wish you all the success. I know it will be successful, but it's really fun to have front row seats to now that I know you, to watch you go through this and be on this journey. It's a lot of fun being able to cheer you on from a distance. But again, I'm not letting you go. I have some questions I want to ask you. And I'm going to start here. What is your go-to Harvey's order?
Go-to Harvey's order: Angus burger with cheese, Harv sauce, onion, lettuce, pickle, jalapenos. I'm a big pickle. I like everything pickled.
Yeah, same.
And a poutine. But you can only have those every once in a while.
That's like not the go-to every time, the go-to every other time. That's amazing. I have to tell you, going to Harvey's as a kid, we used to get so excited because we used to get to pick what we put on our burgers, which wasn't the case everywhere, right? And for context, we're a family of 5, but my dad would always have these fork and dine coupons, so 4 burgers, 4, but we'd always be like, but Dad, there's 5 of us. And he's like, there's plenty of food, just eat. So I don't know. We grew up on the fork and dine coupons. And if you know my dad, I love him to death. Coupon Ted, we call him. But we just loved it growing up. And I have to say, when we took our kids there for the first time, they too had their face up against the glass, so excited that they could have as much mustard and as much ketchup and as many pickles as they want. I think it's awesome. So amazing. What are some of your, when in all that spare time that you have, what are some of your favorite hobbies?
Golf. Golf will take up the majority of my time. And it's a mindset battle. You're battling your own mindset when you're on the golf course.
I haven't tried to golf yet, and maybe I will blame it on my mindset. You mentioned this earlier. Well, we talked about it multiple times about being a foodie, and it's so funny because as soon as you mentioned, street meat before a Jays game or a baseball game, I was immediately transported to my childhood, because that was always, I still do it. I still eat street meat before Jays games. Let's make that very clear. But there's something about food that transports you back to an amazing memory. Do you have maybe a best meal or a best memory around food that you can remember?
My best meal would be at Alinea in Chicago. Just everything about that meal from start to finish. Now, this is 3-star Michelin, so it's got a high level of expectation. Was just absolutely incredible, and I got to share it with my best friends, which adds a whole different element to the experience. And then, like I said, equally good is just that sausage before the Jays game on a beautiful summer day.
Yeah, it's funny. I've had great expensive meals. I've got a pretty good story about a very expensive meal. When you go to a restaurant and there's no prices on the menu, let that be a warning. It is going to be expensive.
Absolutely.
That was this one time in Italy on a random island that apparently, well, that's a long story, but we'll talk about that another time. But honestly, one of my best meals was probably, to your point, like street pad thai in Thailand that I think cost $1. And it was so delicious. And I've never tasted anything like it ever again. And I'm immediately transported back to that time when I think about it. So I love that so much. We talked about this a little bit, but you learned a lot along the way from a very young age being in the family business. But if you could go back and share some words of wisdom with little Khalil, maybe teenage Khalil, what are some of the things you would go back and share with yourself?
I'm still sharing this one with myself. Don't take yourself too seriously.
Oh yeah. All the advice on here that I give is also, I'm directing it at myself on a regular basis. Don't worry. It's a work in progress. Yeah.
Yeah. And then just the idea of this too shall pass. It's easy to get caught up in the difficult, stressful moments of business and life. And it's just a moment in time. It's
so true. It'll pass. Well, speaking of passing, the time has passed very quickly. We have spent a good chunk of time together, and I'm super grateful for it. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate you chatting and sharing all your stories. And as I mentioned earlier, I really do wish you continued success, however you define that, and all the best. And I hope everyone will find you on Instagram, on LinkedIn. We'll post all your handles so people can follow you. You do a lot of market research, eating a lot of food, and it's so fun to watch and makes me very hungry. But I encourage people to sign up and follow accordingly. But thank you for joining me here, and I will see you soon.
Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure. Wonderful conversation.
Likewise. Take care, Khalil.
See you soon.